We're back. We are live on Sirius XM 103 Faction Talk, our new home. Heard live Monday through Friday, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, noon to 2 Pacific, talking rock music with you every day in this live window. And it is always great to talk rock music with a man who truly knows his rock, who has brought great rock to us for decades now and is very much a rock historian, always giving us some lessons about the roots and the origins of this music we love, and that he still delivers so well. He's got a new album out called Detroit Muscle, and he is currently on a tour that just started as well. We know him as Uncle Ted. Ted Nugent joins us live right now on Trunk Nation. How are you, Ted?
Eddie Trunk, I'm so good at stupid. It's so wonderful to talk to a fellow real music lover. You are a rock-solid, all-American, shit-kicker soundtrack blood brother of mine. God bless you. You're doing a great job, and thank you for continuing to celebrate that work ethic of these musicians and how we cultivate our craft and how people pivot on the music that we make. I love this. Don't you love this more now than ever?
I do. And you know what I love? I love when an artist like you, Ted, who has been doing this for better than 50 years, is still out there, still doing it well, and still finds the time and has the drive to make new music like Detroit Muscle. I mean, there's a lot of artists that have catalogs like yours. Hey, we'll just go out and play the old stuff. But for you, you're still making new music. You've got a huge catalog of records, and this new one is killer. Tell me about the drive for an artist like yourself, for as long as you've done it, to still want to create new music as well.
Well, I'm dangerously inspired. I think you've noticed that in the times that we've met. I'm always surrounded by just gifted virtuosos. And I don't think in the music industry we have focused on the incredible work ethic of these musicians. I don't care who you love, whether it's ZZ Top or AC/DC or Van Halen or Sammy Hagar or Grand Funk Railroad. The history of the work ethic, that what my guys put into it. I am on tour. Eddie, this is outrageous to say because the evidence is irrefutable. This is the most intense, fun, dynamic, musical time of my life with this son of a bitch, Jason Hartless, on drums from Detroit. God, Eddie, I mean, it's all about the groove and the grind and the rhythm. And Greg Smith, these are the rhythm section that every guitar player dreams of. You cannot be driven absolutely wild when you stand shoulder to shoulder with these kind of guys. So I'm always making music. I'm still fascinated by guitar tone adventure. I have guitars and amps and guns and ammo and bows and arrows and dogs. I'm surrounded by, and have you seen Mrs. Nugent lately? I mean, how do you not write love songs when you've got a Mrs. Nugent hand? Yeah, I always emphasize, and we've always talked about this, I'm 74 this year, and I've been clean and sober. So all those nerve endings are really not only just as powerful as they were as a teenager in the garage with my first loud amp. Actually, I was way before teenager. But I'm so inspired by what Greg and Jason do. And then the Detroit Muscle recording with Michael Lutz, the author of Smoking in the Boys' Room from Brownsville Station. This guy is just a musical force, just like all my musicians, all my team, Tim and Andy Paddlin out of Detroit. These guys live and breathe and just shoot musical flames out of their ass every day. The energy level, Eddie, before we die, about 40 years from now, before we go, you got to come witness the piss and vinegar, the passion, the wild-eyed musical cravings. It's almost like we're Lewis and Clark with a bunch of Sacagaweas on the Northwest Passage of uncharted musical adventure. So the inspiration is absolute. And I used the word dangerous a minute ago. At 74 and all my life, I've got to manage my adrenaline or it will kill me because I so plunge into these songs. And on tour right now in the insanity of 2022, where the music has always represented a force of our spirit and our emotion and our defiance and our middle finger and our sex organs. In this crazy, ugly time in America and around the world, the element of sanctuary that the music represents, the smiles, the clenched fists, the dancing, the skinny-ass girls in the front row. Tonight will be my 6,818th rock out, going back to 1955.
Wow.
And it will be the most important, most intense rock out of my life, Eddie. This is unbelievable, isn't it?
Have you chronicled every show you've done, Ted? Like, is that a real number? Like, if you actually counted from your first show now, you have an archivist, or do you keep a log or a diary?
I didn't in the beginning, but I went back and I realized I played Marilyn McMillan's birthday party in 1959. I was in Marilyn McMillan's basement in Detroit in 1959, so I counted that. I was at Walt's Malt Shop on Warwick and Grand River in 19. I played the Michigan State Fair with the Joe Podorskis Capital School of Music Review. I played Honky Tonk and Boogie Woogie on a little Fender Music Master guitar. So I went back and counted all the jams, all the high school dances, the sock hops, the fraternity parties, the pool parties, the sorority parties, playing in the basement at St. Viator's High School during the initiation of the Amboy Dukes. I count every Star-Spangled Banner that I performed for the military and law enforcement and various charities and with the great Donald Trump. Those are all official rockouts. And and I did have the list of concerts from 1967 when I graduated from high school with the Amboy Dukes. We played 300 plus concerts a year, Eddie. It was just a musical orgy, both literally and figuratively. And I counted them all. And tonight in Ohio, 6,818. I swear to God, if that's not exactly, it's probably a few short. Because when I get in the barn and I've got friends over and I got a bass player and a drummer and we rock and people are drinking beer and roasting marshmallows, that count. Doesn't that count?
Yeah, of course it does. Of course, I would count it all.
Oh, yeah.
I count every bit of it. Yes. If you sing "Happy Birthday" to somebody, I count that as a performance, Ted.
All right, then make that 6,821.
So you reference, and I have such respect for you having gone through the 70s like you did. I mean, I think people forget the enormity of the Ted Nugent experience, especially back in those days, double live gonzo period, playing the stadiums and all that stuff. It blows my mind when you talk about the fact through all of that you remained and still to this day remain clean and sober. Were there temptations back then, Ted? Did anybody ever try to pull you into that world? I imagine you would just shot an arrow in them if they did. But I mean, how did you manage to do that through that decade of excess that it was?
Shit luck. Absolute shit luck. Because yes, everybody offered me dope, and I mean Jimi Hendrix offered me dope. And I was already fortified by that time in 1969 when we played with Jimmy, and John Belushi pushed really hard to get me to snort cocaine, and Keith Moon really almost got violent with me because I wouldn't drink his whiskey. But there's these beautiful human things about me I thought I might emphasize on the Eddie Trunk show, that I'm a defiant motherfucker. And if I see a procedure that is causing harm and great musicians losing the sense of the arrangement, not being in tune, blowing an important musical passage, that registers in my then clean, attentive radar mind that smoking that dope caused this incredible musician to blow it, not to mention the drooling, the stumbling, the boogers coming out of their nose, not to mention the dying, not to mention that they're dying. Now, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I spent the weekend at Studio 54 with Keith Richards, Eddie.
Oh, my gosh. What year are we talking? Ted, what year are we talking?
That 1979, after I sold out Madison Square Gardens. And we had a big party with Eddie Money and Bill Graham and who's the artist? Andy Warhol. And who's the author that wrote In Cold Blood? Truman Capote. I'm hanging out with all these guys, and they all wanted to talk guns and bows and arrows with me. It was awesome. And so Keith and I and Britt Eklund, we go to Studio 54. And of course, Keith, I praise clean and sober, but I also praise Keith. I've never condemned an artist. I try to help him, but I don't really. I'm not mean about it. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
But I tried to sway him. As often as I say being clean and sober is the ultimate, Keith notwithstanding, because he was a fun guy, he was a kind guy, and of course his musical influences are virtually, immeasurable, right?
Of course.
So I adore that. But I turned it down. I was lucky. When I say lucky, I was so disciplined by my dad. If I got a line, he'd have knocked my block off. He'd have ripped my head off and shit down my neck. He was really hardcore. So I was afraid of the retribution. I think it's good to be fearful of consequences,
right,
which seems to be missing in our society today. Walk the streets of New York and check that out. So by the time I was offered the first joint, there weren't even any hippies. It was beatniks. They were offering me. I didn't know what the hell they were smoking. It sure smelled good, but I didn't dare smoke a cigarette. I didn't know what they were. But I was like 11 and 12 playing pool parties at a fraternity party, and the beatniks looked like Dobie Gillis and Maynard G. Krebs. Are you with me on these images?
The people you just mentioned, I don't know, but beatnik I know.
Look up Maynard G. Krebs. But anyhow, I knew that if I would have smoked that cigarette, again, I didn't know what it was. I was clueless. But I turned it down. And all these beatniks with the beret and the goatees, they were trying to have me smoke these cigarettes. I knew my dad would have kicked my ass because I had to be home by 10 o'clock. I was just a kid. And so I avoided it for fear of my dad's discipline, which is good. This is okay.
Yeah,
now,
I was the same way, Ted. I've been in the music industry professionally next year 40 years, and I never had, thankfully, those issues either. And people say that to me. You went through the business in the 80s. I worked for a label, all this stuff. How the hell did you do it? I just I knew it wasn't good for me. I saw people around me dying and being all fucked up. And I also, and my parents instilled good values in me to say, you know what, everything in moderation, but don't go crazy with that. But what comes to mind when we talk about this is, and yesterday I did a big show on Aerosmith, and I was telling my audience this because we were talking about Aerosmith Rocks and Toys in the Attic in that period. And I said, there were a lot of people that would go to see Aerosmith back then, and they would either say they saw a great show or a horrible show because they were so whacked out that they couldn't function that night. Another guy from your neck of the woods, Alice Cooper, who of course has been sober forever, but back in the day will tell you he was anything but. You wonder, and Aerosmith's a band you did a lot of work with back in the 70s and touring with. So you probably saw it all around you. You might have even followed those guys one night, or they followed you, and you're like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to crush them because they couldn't barely stand up when they played.
Those are the exact examples I'm referencing, because Stephen and Joe and Brad and Tom and Joey, these guys are so gifted. They have so enriched our lives, like Alice has in all his bands, all of our favorite bands. The enrichment that music soundtrack has provided humanity is one of the greatest propellants for quality of life. I think we agree with that 100%. Mm-hmm. But when we were on tour with some of those bands, and we were recording one of my records down in Miami when AC/DC was recording Highway to Hell, and old Bon Scott was just a train wreck. And I would like to have, even when I was with Keith Richards that weekend, I wish we could have talked about Chuck Berry and Gibson guitars and Fender amps, and that he used a Sears Silvertone amp on that first England's greatest hit, newest hit makers. And we had so much to talk about. But Eddie, he couldn't talk. He couldn't form a syllable. He's almost as bad as this guy in the White House. He stumbled to find a syllable to match. And that's what I mean. Here, these guys, when Aerosmith is at their peak, it is the ultimate musical moment. Emotion, passion, authority, fire. It's just outrage. But so many nights he stumbling, couldn't remember the lyrics, and they wouldn't play the right chords. And I talked to him. I try to talk to him, but when you're stoned, you can't really have a meaningful conversation. So those were examples that fortified my decision. And remember, too, we talk about this. I'm a bow hunter. If you're going to kill dinner with a sharp stick, you can't be stoned, or you'll have to buy chicken.
Right.
I love that original Aboriginal Native American stealth spirit. And that so fortified me to turn down intoxicants, because my radar, when I'm sitting out here in my underpants right now with my dogs in the sacred swamps of Michigan with my beautiful wife, Shemaine, and I just shot my bow and arrow. It is so samurai. It is such a martial arts moment that you can't attain that level of spirituality if you're drooling. And everybody out there that's listening, I know this is a rock and roll show. I love you people that get high, but your life will be so much more intense and enjoyable and gratifying, and the people around you will be happier if you're not drunk or stoned. Period.
Ted, you mentioned you're sitting there in your underwear. I'm curious. I'm looking at the album cover. Somebody called into my show yesterday when I told them that you were coming on, and they brought up the album Intensities in 10 Cities as being one of the greatest names for a record. And of course, on the cover, you are rocking your loincloth. Do you still have the loincloth, Ted? And have you ever rocked it around the house or while you were hunting?
No, I don't want to scare Mrs. Nugent and wear a loincloth nowadays. I know we ate the loincloth, Eddie, and it was delicious. You add enough garlic and butter to my dirty socks, and it'll be okay. No, those were the era when I was Bruce Lee with a guitar. I was quite trim, fit, and sinewy. And I'm in good shape now, but not loincloth shape. Okay. For example, Eddie, would you wear a loincloth?
No, never. Even when I was in good shape, though. That's the difference. You can get away with it.
Loincloth, huh?
You can get away with it. Man of War can get away with it, but I can't get away with it ever. No way.
And you're right. What a great album title, Intensities in 10 Cities. Well, I love that stuff.
Well, and Double Live Gonzo is a great album title, too. And, of course, that's one of the quintessential live albums, ever. And you know what I always wanted to ask you about that, Ted, is that so many people we've found out, the 70s were the pinnacle of the live record. They would break or make a band. And Double Live Gonzo, Live Bootleg, Kiss Alive, just great records. But in some of the cases, we found out over the time, and the artists have even admitted it, that the records were not actually live because they were doctored in the studio. Was Double Live Gonzo a truly live record? Did you do some work in it in post?
The whole album was absolutely live. And if we may, let us genuflect at God's gift of musical monsters. Cliff Davies on drums, God rest his soul. Rob Grange on the bass guitar. Holy shit, what a gifted groove master. And Derek St. Holmes on guitar and vocals. Holy shit, has there ever been a better band? Yeah. So what we captured, now there was one song, Baby Please Don't Go, recorded in San Antonio, suck my bonio. What a love song. I've been playing Baby Please Don't Go since 1957. We still play it today occasionally. But there was a complication technically with the feed to the bass guitar on that. So in an emergency, I don't remember where Rob was, because he played it perfect. He was just the perfect bass god. But I was in the studio when they go, this is a great performance, but the bass feed is all distorted and it's breaking up. And I said, well, give me that Fender P bass and let's redo it. And I played bass on Baby Please Don't Go on Double Live Gonzo just to fix it because of technology. But I didn't do it any better than what Rob Grange would have done. He did it perfect, but there was a technical fuck up.
I want to talk to you a couple things about Detroit Muscle, the current record, here in a second. But before that, one more thing on the past that I wanted to bring up, and that is the Free For All album. And for those that don't know, there was an unknown singer on the Free For All album besides yourself, and that was a guy that went by the name of Meatloaf. About a year before Bat Out of Hell came out, and everybody knew his name, and he sold millions of records. And sadly, we lost Meat recently. And I was just wondering, Ted, if you had any stories about Meat, how you came to find him to be on the record, and if you stayed in touch with him over the years.
Well, as you introduced me, I am this walking historian on rock and roll. Let me tell you, I'll try to keep it short. But Meatloaf had a duet, Stoney and Meatloaf. Stoney was this beautiful, sexy, red-haired chick with a voice like Aretha Franklin, and Whitney Houston meets Janis Joplin. Holy smokes. And Meatloaf, of course, is this phenomenal, powerful, soulful voice. And they would open up for the Amboy Dukes at the pavilion and the Crow's Nest East and the different clubs all around Michigan. You could play 100 shows in Michigan and never leave the state. And there's so many opportunities. So Meatloaf, Stoney and Meatloaf would open for us, and we became friends because of his soulfulness, his energy. He's a big guy that had a big voice. So we became friends and kept in touch and bumped into each other on occasion. So when it's time to do Free For All, and I'm creating these new songs, of course, Derek St. Holmes is probably definitely one of the greatest rock and roll soulful voices in the history of the world. And he sang the specific songs. But when I'm writing the songs, there are no rules. There are no parameters. And I'm thinking, Hammer Down, I Love You So I Told You I Go. I'm going to call Meatloaf. Man, would his phenomenal, deep, emotional voice be perfect on these? So I called him, and he came in and sang on some songs on the Free For All album. And, of course, like you said, then he went on to become the musical force to reckon with, rightly so, because of his professionalism, his work ethic. There's that term again. And yes, we did lose him here recently. It was a very sad time. And I did keep in touch with him off and on for a long time, but then it became very difficult. I lost track of him, and I never got through to him. I put out feelers. I'm always putting out feelers, trying to get a hold of people just to say hello, because I don't have everybody's phone number. But, yeah, he was a great musical force, a great man. And, again, the work ethic, Eddie. These musicians, we bust our ass to put our heart and soul into everything we deliver every night. And that's the real celebration, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. And, one other quick thing on the 70s period, which I love so much, you were one of the few artists from that era. And I remember I used to play it, and I wish I had one, to have had a pinball machine, the Ted Nugent pinball machine. And I have a second home now in Vegas, and there's this huge pinball museum there where you can go in and play the games. They got games starting from like the 30s all the way through now. And I was looking, and the one machine they didn't have was your machine, because they had all that stuff from the 70s, the Kiss machine, the Elton John machine, and all of that. But tell me how the Nugent pinball machine came about, and if you still have one. Do you have one?
My daughter has one, and my taxidermist has one. Do you have a taxidermist? You should get one. My taxidermist has one, and my daughter has one. And I run into them all the time. I've probably signed a couple hundred of them. I've autographed a couple hundred. I bump into people, and somehow we rendezvous, and I'm able to autograph them. But I guess they're quite the collector's item, and that company got a hold of us, and they thought, what would be perfect in America other than people randomly playing with Ted Nugent's steel balls at night? So that's how that came to be. But that was really cool. I like that stuff,
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, those are great games. They still hold up today. And that's why as soon as I was going through the aisles, like, oh, Ted's has got to be in here. So next time I'm in there, when I'm at my Vegas place, I'm going to ask that guy, I'm going to say, you got to source a Nugent machine and get one in here, because walking through those aisles takes me back to being a kid and growing up on the boardwalk at the Jersey Shore. And that's where I used to play those games and all those great arcades. So it's great stuff. Ted,
I think they could probably find them.
Yeah, I would love to find one. On the new album, Detroit Muscle, some tremendous songs on here. There's one I got to ask you about, though, because I mean, I've said to so many people so many times, I think you're one of the most underrated guitar players in rock history, and I love your playing, the tone, your whole approach to playing. It's amazing. And there's a song, there's a lot on this record that showcases that, but you have an instrumental on this record. And of course, this to me is as great as something like Homebound, which is one of your classics. And it's a song called Winter, Spring, Summer, Fall. Tell me about including that instrumental. Now, there's another instrumental, of course, which is amazing. The record closes out with the Star Spangled Banner. But doing an original song like that as an instrumental, tell me about that coming together.
Well, when you say coming together, people ask me how I write songs, and I really don't. I've never sat down with a paper and pencil and a guitar and go, geez, what key should I write? What should I write about? Samurai is about spirit streaming. You call upon the gifts from God when you shoot a bow and arrow, or when you train with the Navy SEALs marksmanship, or the samurai sword, or the different martial arts. You have to be one with the spirit. And that's how I approach my guitar playing. I do not think. I go into my man cave cuckoo's nest. I'm always tweaking amps and always checking out new Gibson Birdlands and Les Pauls and Paul Reed Smith guitars. I'm always experimenting. I mean, literally, Eddie, every day. I can't wait to finish wrenching on my truck and doing my chores, and I'm fixing tractors, and then I get in the man cave cuckoo's nest, and I can't. It's almost like a kid that can't wait to try to play a Chuck Berry lick. But when I get in, because I've so tweaked my amplifiers for response, for resonance, especially with a Gibson Birdland, which is a hollow body and extremely touchy. It has such a resonance because it's made for jazz and not necessarily the volume with which I unleash it. So I don't write songs. I ejaculate them. I pick up the guitar and licks happen. And you ask Greg, you ask Jason, you ask the damn Yankees, you ask all my bands. Every time I pick up my Gibson Birdland through these amps that I'm always tweaking, these grinding patterns and licks, like all my songs start with a guitar pattern, a lick, a groove, a rhythm. And winter, spring, summer, fall, because I'm in a swamp in Michigan or on our ranch in Texas, there's a spirit of the wild. I'm a hunter, I'm a fisherman, I'm a trapper, I'm an environmentalist. I plant trees and I plant crops, and I get dirt and blood and guts in my fingernails. So you're never going to talk to anybody more organic than me. That instrumental, like Homebound, like Scottish Tea with Bill White, my bass player in 1967, like Earth Tones with Marco Mendoza, Migration with the Amboy Dukes, Hibernation on Double Live Gonzo.
Yeah.
These are musical exploratory movements that, again, the musicians I'm surrounded by, I don't have to tell them anything, Eddie. It's like samurai spirit. These melodies, they're on that neck somewhere. And because I'm cleansed with my outdoor activity, I'm cleansed with the healing powers of nature. It's like right after fire-breathing sex, a guitar lick is going to happen. And it's going to be sexy, and it's going to be greasy, and it's going to be earthy, and it's going to be grinding. And that's the life I lead. So all these licks, that's where they come from. And I'm working on new instrumentals. I played a lick this morning. I didn't record it, but I guarantee when I pick up my Birdland, I'm going to be able to play it again. And I'm going to call the song Butterfingers because it's just screaming, fluent, grinding like a Motown funk brother on venison. There's no end to where that guitar neck can take me. And what an adventure this is, huh?
Yeah, I know you only. I can't keep you too much longer here, but I gotta. When you talk about playing that Birdland and the way that guitar plays. Now, I'm not a musician, but I do remember last time we spoke, and I had you on the air. We were talking. Eddie Van Halen had just passed away, so I guess it was just under a couple years ago. And of course, Van Halen, one of the first acts they opened for was you. And I remember you saying that on that tour, Eddie came over and tried to play your Birdland through your rig, and it was just like he didn't know what was going on, and vice versa. You picked up his guitar through his rig, and it was a whole different thing. So that Birdland is really something that you've really got to get your head around, because even a guy like Eddie Van Halen was kind of perplexed by it. Am I right on that? Do I have that right?
What a great story! Yes, what a great man he was. What a force to reckon with. How he enriched our lives with his musical genius. And let me clarify, in case Howard Stern is lying punks are listening because they made up a dirty fucking lie on the Howard Stern show that I was jealous of Eddie and that we had a contention because of the way we play guitar. What a bunch of fucking liars. Eddie and I were dear friends. When Eddie became clean and sober, guess who his first phone call was? To me, because I lovingly prodded him to get the drugs and alcohol and tobacco out of his life. I did it in a loving way, and he was resistant, as most people are, but we had a wonderful relationship. And on that stage, I was fascinated to see what this guy was doing with a handmade guitar back in 77. And I went up and said, "Hi, Eddie, I'm dead. What is this rig? It's awesome." And he whipped out those unbelievable, unique licks of his, and he handed me his guitar. And even though it was this unique rig and the amplification and all these effects and just one of a kind, as soon as I started playing his bastard Stratocaster, well, it sounded like me. Because the way I touched the instrument, but not quite like a Birdland, because a Birdland just feeds back uncontrollably. It's like some angry, pissed off beast. And I had it in the Birdland, it just fed back and fed back. But here's the takeaway. It's in the hands and in the heart. It's in the spirit of the musician. And when Eddie played my Birdland, and I was able to back it down a little bit so it wasn't so out of control feedback, on my Gibson Birdland through my Fender amps, it sounded like Eddie fucking Van Halen, because he is it. And even with his rig, I would play some of my licks. I played the Cat Scratch lick, and I played the Free For All lick, and it sounded like Ted fucking Nugent. So, and I'll never forget, people would call me and go, "Howard Stern had a guy on saying you and Eddie were angry at each other." Well, Eddie, why do people do that? Why did they make stuff up? Or why did they go there? How about Rolling Stone magazine claiming that my song Snakeskin Cowboys is the most offensive homophobic song ever? Eddie, what the fuck does Snakeskin Cowboys have to do with homosexuality?
I don't know, Ted.
Why do they hate and lie like that? What is their motivation?
I just think it's agendas and clickbaits and all that stuff. I stay out of it. I'm active on social media, but I don't get into comments or any of that stuff. I just do what I do, and you can't even get tied up in it. I know it's hard not to sometimes but it's just ridiculous.
Because you're an honest man. You have a heart. You are honest, and you're goodwill and decency. But my point is, Eddie Van Halen, we all worship the gift he gave us. There was never a negative moment between Eddie and I. He and I got along just great, and we loved the same kind of music. And he had a miraculous touch on the guitar, and I have my own touch. And that moment with those two different guitars and two different rigs, it proved that it really is in the hand of the individual. And it was a great, great moment. I cherish that moment.
I could talk to you about music forever. I just want to run this by you. Two quick things. So you mentioned this band a second ago, and every time I have anybody that was a member of this band on this show, fans and listeners ask me, will they ever? And that is, of course, Damn Yankees. Is there ever been any dialogue with you and Tommy and Michael and Jack about doing anything ever again?
We love each other. We respect each other. We get a kick out of each other, and we keep in touch. I'm in touch with Michael, just an unbelievable rhythm force. He's been with Leonard Skinner now for, 30 years. Jack Blades and I talk all the time. The whole Night Ranger thing is just wonderful. Tommy Shaw is a living, breathing firestorm of musicality and soulfulness. We keep in touch, and we all kind of prod and cajole and threaten each other that we're going to get in a room together someday and all hell's going to break loose. Because, Eddie, the beautiful thing about what the Damn Yankees represents is that God truly loves me, because he keeps sending me these unbelievably wonderful gentlemen with unlimited talents. And there is no time frame. There is no specific current plans. However, the threat remains palpable that the horsome foursome of the Damn Yankees should get in a room together. And I promise you, Eddie Trunk, I always rave about how I love you because you celebrate music, because it's such a meaningful, positive, inspiring force in everybody's lives. Music is universal communication. No matter where your mind might take you, where your spirit resides, there is music that represents our heart and soul. When the damn Yankees get in a room someday together, within seconds, within the minute the amplifier is warmed up, just like the first time we got in a room in New York and the Foreigners' a rehearsal room, within seconds, killer songs happened. And I promise you, if we could somehow all get together, my wife is smiling at me right now. She goes, "You guys got to make music again, damn it." And if Mrs. Nugent says so, then maybe that's the prod that we need. But I so revere those guys. I so love those guys. And I'm with you, Eddie. I hope we can rendezvous, because they are such musical forces, and they're grunting and grinding. Yes, they're music forces, but they're street shit kicker music forces. There's a soulfulness to what Tommy and Jack and Michael create every time we get together, and it was nothing but a 100% positive experience. And I hope it does happen.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, a listener of mine a few years ago had a great idea, and some booking agents got to make this happen, because it's the no-brainer to me. Next summer, you put a shed tour together. The bill is Styx, Night Ranger, Ted Nugent, and then you guys all play your own sets, and then at the end of the night, you come out, you play 4 or 5 big damn Yankee songs, and everybody goes home happy. The best of all worlds. I think that's a great idea.
I think that's a great idea. If I wasn't in the bands, I'd show up to witness it. I guarantee you that.
Well, listen, man,
know.
I know.
Let me tell you this too.
Oh, go ahead. I got time. I don't know how much time you have, but I just don't. I don't want to keep you too long. I know you got a gig.
No, I'm getting on a plane here in a minute, heading down to Dayton, Ohio. Those people need me down there. Yeah, we play every night. It's just intoxicating. I'm like drunk on freedom and guitar tone right now. It's out of body. I'm the luckiest motherfucker. I started playing in Detroit in 1957. Well, actually 55, 56, in girlfriends' basements. But I opened up for Billy Lee and the Rivieras at the Walled Lake Casino in the early 60s. And they changed their name to Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels. And Saturday night at Freedom Hill outside of Detroit, I will be joined by my number one guitar hero, influence, motivation, Jimmy McCarty, will join me on stage, Eddie, and so will Johnny Benagic, the original guitar player drummer for Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels, and we're going to play a firestorm of Jenny Take a Ride, and I am absolutely out of my mind. Can't wait for that to happen.
That guy's a super underrated guitar player. You know who else told me that's one of the biggest reasons he plays is Ace Frehley. Ace told me that Jimmy McCarty is one of his favorite guitar players ever.
Yeah, but if I may, on the Eddie Trunk Music Celebration, thank you, Eddie, for celebrating music, including mine and all the music that we love. But thank you, everybody listening, for supporting my big, greasy-ass Detroit rhythm and blues rock and roll dream. I've been recording for 62 years. I've been touring, I guess you could call sock hops touring, so I've been doing that for 66 years. I'm having the time of my life. People love Detroit Muscle. Tim and Andy and Michael Lutz and Greg and Jason, we put our heart and soul into every lick, every song, every night, every concert, and the people are still showing up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to all those unbelievable musicians that have put their heart and soul into Ted Nugent songs and the damn Yankee songs. I get emotional thinking about what a lucky guy I am, because somehow I'm a shit kicker, like you're a shit kicker, and if anybody makes shit kicker music, it's me, and the shit kickers are still supporting me. I thank you, I thank you, I thank you.
Everybody get all your information at tednugent.com, information about the Camp for Kids and all the other stuff Ted does. Of course, the tour dates are there, and the album Detroit Muscle is out now. And if you happen to be in Ohio, Ted is getting on the plane in his underwear right now to come and see you play tonight in Huber Heights, Ohio at the Rose Music Center, and the dates go through the end of August. It's always great to talk to you, Ted. Hopefully we'll do it again soon. I'm going to try to get out there and see you at one of these shows as well.
You bet, Eddie. Congratulations for your music career, and thank Joel, your whole team there, and Godspeed, man. I look forward every time we get together. It's a musical celebration every time, man. Thank you.
Safe travels, man. Have a good show tonight, and say hi to the guys.
All right, live it up.
Thanks, Ted. Take care. Here's a little bit of Ted's record, actually, as we go into our break, too. Joel, do a little of that instrumental. It's such a cool vibe. Winter, spring, summer, fall. A little bit of Ted's music from Detroit Muscle, his brand new record.